Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nerd Nest. I'm Bill, and I am joined today by Gardner, by Russ, and by Rich. And today we're going to be talking about all kinds of crazy news, but I wanted to start by just really quick talking to Gardner, give him a chance to plug his game. He was on a couple weeks ago, and he made a game, and I just wanted Gardner, tell everybody about your game and where they can find it real quick.
Yeah, so I have a game. It's called Dudelings Arcade Sports Ball. It's available on Steam and itch.io. And I wanted to thank you, Bill, for having me on because like this, it's helped tremendously. Actually, one of the cool things is that we're working on like a new patch for it, and it should be out maybe next week. So some minor UI improvements and gameplay. It's going to be cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I have to admit, I haven't been playing it in the past couple of weeks because I've been playing Animal Well. But as soon as I get, because I am obsessed with it, but as soon as I'm done with Animal Well, I'm going back and I'm playing more of Dudelings because I feel like there's strategies that I feel like my brain is understanding, but I haven't practiced enough to implement them. And it's a really cool game, and I just love that you've made this game and that you and your girlfriend voice it, and I love the art style and like everything about it is very, very cool, especially the name, Sports Ball, because I don't really care all that much about sports. So I like the idea that it's this weird thing. Rich, have you been playing it much since you were talking about like punching people and everything?
Yeah, a bit. But what I wanted to say was, like you play. I had the same problem at first, right? Like I was playing like 15-minute bursts, and I had to sit down for like an hour and like really like practice basically, because like some of it is just you're not not necessarily like coordinated that way, right? Like you have to like change your brain a little bit, but once you do start to get some of those like strategies and stuff like that, so it's a lot of fun.
I've heard from people who have played the game and they have come up with their own strategies that have blown my mind. But the thing that I found is like it's kind of an emergent thing where two players can't occupy the same doodling at the bottom of the screen at the same time, and so if you like move into someone, you can jump over them essentially. And so if you're like both moving towards the other side of the map and you're like in sync with each other moving, you can like move double speed across the screen, which is kind of a fun thing to happen, especially if you're not expecting it. It's like, whoa, that was so cool. Like you rush all the way across. But yeah, awesome. It's pretty cool because like it seems like people have been receiving it really well. I mean, it has like, I don't think there's a single negative review. We have like 13 reviews on Steam right now. And I'm just really happy with the reception that it's had from the community. It's pretty great.
And it's $5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. $5, people. Too easy.
And the soundtrack's also available for $5 as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. The music is awesome on that.
Right?
Yeah, I love the music.
Right, because you got your favorite band to do the music for your game, right?
Absolutely, yeah, I did.
That's unbelievably cool. All right, well, let's jump in and hit the first big topic of today, and I want to talk about the leaks that have been happening around Valve's next project, and boy. Everybody always says Valve can't count to 3. They got Half-Life and then Half-Life 2. They got Portal, then they got Portal 2. They got Team Fortress and then Team Fortress 2. And everybody was, I think it might have been a few months ago that people were talking about this idea that Valve was working on something Team Fortress related, because they had, I can't remember the details, but there was something along like they had gone after somebody who was doing Team Fortress stuff. That's not important to the context of the conversation, but it turns out they're not working on Team Fortress something. Instead, they're working on this new game called, and I just closed my show notes by accident because I'm a big old dummy. Deadlock. And boy, oh boy, People are pretty excited about this. Now, the way that this game has been described, it's an Overwatch style hero shooter, which is hilarious because Overwatch was described as a Team Fortress style game, right? Featuring heroes, which is essentially what we've been seeing, what we saw from Team Fortress. And this comes to us from Tom Phillips, the editor over at Eurogamer. And they say details have emerged from an ongoing closed alpha playtest of the game where hundreds of people have been playing ahead of the imminent public announcement for the project. It's apparently been under NDA. Just to be clear, I haven't played it. I'm not on NDA. I don't know anything about this except for what I've been reading. And then it's been described as a MOBA, which I like MOBAs a lot, especially MOBAs that you can play with a controller, like Smite, that kind of thing, with tower defense-inspired elements, things that are comparable to Valorant, Overwatch, Dota 2, and you take all that thing together, all those things together, squeeze it with Team Fortress 2, and you get Deathlock. And I'm just curious what everybody thinks about this. Rich, I'm going to start with you. What do you think about the idea behind this game?
Yeah, so a couple of points of clarification, other than Deadlock. Did
I call it Deathlock again?
Yeah,
it's a better name. Sorry, go ahead.
I think Deathlock actually is better than Deadlock. So this was previously codenamed Neon Prime. Is that what it was called?
Yes.
Yep.
And before that, it was Citadel.
Citadel, yes. So this has gone through a couple of iterations at this point. And it was Tyler McVicker, I think, that had the most details up to this point. And in the video that Tyler McVicker published, he did sort of speculate that there was no NDA, right? Like you're just sort of just think about how like Valve worked with us, right? We didn't sign anything, but we were expected to stay quiet for the Steam Deck. And so that seems to be how this was handled as well. And some of those people, didn't follow that. And so they leaked the pictures or gameplay or whatever. And then, then it does seem to like we heard about this since Citadel and Neon Prime, where it's sort of like fusing the sort of MOBA and hero shooter genre. And I still don't know what that means. But I'll say this. I didn't really I've never played a MOBA game and I'm not that interested in it. They might be wonderful. I just I don't think I have the capacity for it. I have played Overwatch. I have played Team Fortress. Those are fun, and I would play another one of those. So I'm curious to see can I stick to just the shooter part and not the MOBA part? What does that look like? So I'm interested to see what it holds. But I don't expect this to be something that I play very much at all. I just expect it to be something I dip into and then disappear.
Yeah, so just to clarify for everybody out there who, might be like Rich and not have a lot of experience with MOBAs, they also describe it as tower defense-like. So basically the way MOBAs work is you will have different lanes and, the good guys, your team, are on one side of the lanes and the enemy is on the other side. And the lanes go through the whole map. And so you have towers that are placed alongside those lanes, and just random NPC enemies will walk down the lane, and then when they get to an enemy tower, they'll start beating up on it. Now, the tower usually fights back and kills all the little NPCs, but in order for you to push, what you want to do is you want to push the what's the line in the front. You want to push the battlefront forward by killing all of those towers so that the little guys can march further down and keep attacking the other towers. And you want to take out all of the enemy towers, and then you have to defeat the enemy core. You have different characters that are good at different types of things. So you have areas between the lanes where one character might really perform well in an area between the lanes. And then you have characters that are really good at defense, and characters that are really good at offense, and characters that are really good at just taking out like the little peons and stuff. And so, you get together with a group of, it looked like from the screenshots, 5 other people, make a team, and then you play a match. And the cool thing about a MOBA that I really like is everybody starts at 0. Like when you start playing, everybody's the same power. And as you play the game, you get that progression feeling throughout the match of getting more and more powerful. You unlock new abilities and that kind of stuff. And so I love MOBAs. Most of the time, I can't play them because they're mouse and keyboard and it's click, 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 click. Like you are top down clicking like crazy. But Smite was a controller, like you could play it on a controller, and it wasn't a top down. So you didn't have to do like this nonstop clicking on your screen with your mouse. It made it much more approachable. And that's what I'm excited about here, because I think that there's not enough approachable MOBAs out there. And, you know, Valve has like one of the biggest MOBAs out there. Dota 2. Yeah. Gardner, have you played any MOBAs, or are you like Rich and not interested?
I play MOBAs and then I get wistful for the death of the RTS. I'm more of an RTS guy, but I do enjoy like tower defense games and real-time strategies. So MOBAs should be my thing. It's just they're not. You know, I'm looking at the screenshots here and I'm like, hey, this looks like Half-Life Alyx and Team Fortress had a baby. That's what it looks like to me. Source 2 really has a distinct visual style that it's good at, and this really does feel like that. And I'm definitely going to be trying this when it comes out, mostly because I'm a Valve fan and I love most of their games. But yeah, to answer your question, not a huge MOBA guy.
What about you, Russ? Is this outside of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, I was before you started explaining what a MOBA is, I was going to say, can we pause and explain what a MOBA is? So that was perfect. Nice. I don't know anything about this stuff, you know. The shooting mechanics, you know, I like the idea of like a third-person shooter and stuff. I'm not a big fan of competitive games in particular because they just stress me the heck out, you know. I'd rather do a PvE thing where it's like a team of people against, you know, the computer, and it's against the developers basically. I like that idea. I don't like it when it's like against other people because I don't know. It gets me all like my heart starts racing and stuff. It's like there's a real person on the other side. So yeah, I don't like that stuff. Never have. Even like back Halo LAN days, I was like, this is too much. So
all very fair stuff. I personally am very excited for it because I love the idea behind MOBAs, but only a couple of them have ever executed right. Heroes of the Storm, in my opinion, is the best one, even though it's a top-down one where you got to click like crazy. The reason I liked it so much is because everybody on your team leveled at the same rate. So you never had anybody that felt like they were like holding everybody back, that's me. That's this guy right here, because I would hold people back because I suck. But I felt like I could be carried in that just enough so that I could still contribute, even though I wasn't somebody who was playing like every single day. One thing that jumped out at me about this, and the reason why Tyler McVicker's video featured footage of BioShock, is because I guess one of the characters has the ability to put up like train tracks in the air, kind of like we had in BioShock Infinite, where you could jump up with that weird thing and grab a hold of the train track and fly around the level shooting at dudes as you're playing. And that was something that I thought, that's so fun. I loved that mechanic in BioShock Infinite, and to have one of your heroes have mechanics like that as part of their kit, I think that is pretty cool. It makes me wonder, what are some mechanics that you feel like haven't really been repeated enough in video games, kind of like that rail system from BioShock Infinite? And I didn't think about this until just now, so I haven't given anybody a chance to think about this ahead of time. Does anybody have an idea of something that you feel like that's a mechanic that was cool and never gets used?
Yeah, I would have said the rail in BioShock Infinite. That was pretty awesome.
Stolen. Yeah, man. I feel like I would have answers for this, but I have to think about it. That's something I need to give a lot of thought to, because I will say definitely.
Yeah, one thing that I've really been enjoying is the tether, like the rope part of Halo Infinite. I like that we have something like that. That's a mechanic that I like. Like, it's something I never knew that I needed and stuff, but it allows you to traverse levels like so easily. If I need to get up above a cliff, it's fine. I'll just like, use my little hook thing and get across there. And so that's a mechanic that I like in Halo Infinite, and I wouldn't mind seeing it elsewhere.
That reminds me of in Bulletstorm, when you had that lasso and you could like pull enemies towards you, and then it like put kind of hangs them in air for a second in slow motion where you can take them out. That's a pretty good mechanic.
I will say in Halo Infinite, I absolutely loved that grapple hook that you're talking about, because you could grapple players and you could grapple like, if I remember correctly, you could grapple like guns and stuff. So if there was if you killed somebody, you could then grapple their gun and pull it towards you and then use it. And every time that you pulled off something like that, you just felt like, oh my God, I'm the greatest in the world. That's a great
feels
feeling.
like cheating. Yeah, you're like, oh, I can't believe they're letting me cheat.
yeah, exactly. So let us know, what do you guys think for mechanics that are underused in video games? We just gave you guys some examples. I would love to hear what you all think in the comment section down below that like button. Let's talk about the games that we've been playing this week, and then we'll get back to the news after that. Russ, you said that you haven't been playing anything. Is that just because you've been busy with other stuff, or nothing's getting your interest?
No, it's this stupid thing right here, the Ambernic RG35XXSP. Like, I did an impressions, then they were like, oh yeah, and it's also coming out in like 2 days. And I was like, oh great, now I got to do an actual review of it. And so I just had to hunker down all week and play this. So I tested like retro games and stuff. But there's nothing that I sat down and played. And so I actually was thinking about it in the drive-in this morning. I was like, this is going to be awesome. I get to hear about everybody else's games, and I get to live vicariously through the other panel members. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to play anything.
Rich, what have you been playing, man?
I've been playing Majora's Mask recompiled on the Steam Deck. And
okay,
it is. Yeah,
I downloaded
really
that, good. So I am ready to hear about this, because I have not messed with it yet. Let's tell me all about this, because this is very cool.
So so basically, you give it a ROM of Majora's Mask, and it does the recompilation process, and then basically you're playing a native version of Majora's Mask. So like a port, right, of Majora's Mask to the Steam Deck, or to a PC, if whatever PC you're using. And so it has like obviously like native control, right? But you can remap controls, and you can enable, I think it's enabled by default, but you have to turn on mouse input, but you can enable gyro, right? So like you can aim the arrow with gyro, and it works perfectly when you're looking, and in first person mode you can look with your gyro, and it works perfectly. There's rumble. There is, of course, it's widescreen, right? So they've done that. What was the other? There was a really nice convenience. The way they've mapped it, right? So like the down C button is mapped to RB, which works really well. So that's where I put my arrow. That's where I put my bow and arrow. And then the other two are like the left and the right. They're mapped to the right hand buttons. So what is that? B and Y or something? B and Y. Yeah. So yeah, I use those. It just works. Oh, and there's autosave. That was the other convenience feature. So there is autosave. So if you remember Majora's Mask, there are these statues, these like big bird statues that you have to use to save. And so now it has like a little bird icon at the bottom when it's saving. It tells you at the beginning when it's saving. I don't remember. So like sometimes I will just still save just in case. But it is fairly constantly saving. So that's good to know in case you're worried about losing your progress. And the thing is, Majora's Mask is a game that I've always enjoyed, but I've somehow never finished. So I've started it and I've beaten the first temple like 5 times, like a good amount of times. I think the first time was on like the NVIDIA Shield when I had that handheld, if you guys remember that one. I've done it on 3DS when it came back out. So it was always a game that I would revisit on retro hardware or hardware that would play retro games, and I never beat it. I haven't beaten it yet, but I've gotten further now than I've gotten in the past. So I'm pretty hopeful about beating it. It's the only thing that's pulled me away from Balatro so far.
Wow. Still obsessed with Balatro.
Heck yeah.
So the cool thing about this is the guy who did it, I think it's Wise Guy something, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Wise guy.
Wise guy. Okay. I thought it was Wise Guy 85 or something like that, but whoever it was, he also gave us the ability to do the same thing, but with other N64 games. So you can recompile using a tool that he made a game for PC, pretty much any N64 game. At least that's my understanding of it. Am I getting that right, Rich?
It's more like you can, but it's more like a tool in the middle, right? So like what it will do is it's going to give you recompiled code that then you would need to modify for a specific game. So like I haven't looked into it too deeply yet, but it's not like you can't just give it Blast Core and Blast Core all of a sudden works perfectly.
How did you know that that's the one I was thinking of right now?
Everyone's thinking of Blast Core right now. Yeah, so like it will basically, it's going to make these ports 1,000 times, like orders of magnitude easier to do, but it's not brain dead. It's not just you do it and it works, as far as I've seen. I'm actually looking forward to MVG Modern Vintage Gamers video coming out apparently tomorrow, because all of the videos so far, like as a programmer, they've addressed a good amount, but they haven't addressed all the questions that I have. So I'm hoping that MVG's video gives a little more detail on how it works from a programming perspective.
Yeah, I saw he tweeted something out like, I spent a week to understand this in his video. I'm very interested in what he has to say. I'm sorry, Russ, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, good. I was just going to say, for the other projects that have already come out, Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, they took years. Like there was a website for Ocarina of Time and you could go and check in on their progress. And they'd be like, oh, we're 75% of the way there. Now we're 76% of the way there. And that was for years, And so it's pretty awesome. They're opening the floodgates here. And yeah, it opens up a whole new level of games for other people. My son, I put on Mario 64 on his computer and, widescreen, 1080p, 60 frames, all that stuff. I came home the next day or that evening and he's like, yeah, I beat it. And I was like, oh, how did you beat the game? And he's like, oh, he played it with a keyboard and mouse. Like he played it like Minecraft, basically.
That's amazing.
And he beat the entire game, got like, I don't even know how many stars. Meanwhile, I can never get past like 4 or 5 stars. And so, yeah, it's kind of amazing. He just did it in one day, keyboard and mouse. And so I had him show me, like, I'm like, show me how you're doing this. And sure enough, yeah, he's just doing WASD and his mouse. And he played all of Mario 64 that way.
Oh my God. Imagine doing Bowser throws with the WASD.
Oh, yeah.
He figured it out. Yeah.
Right, yeah, because like if I'm remembering, you had to do this with the stick. So is he doing that with the mouse? Like, is he doing this on the
mouse is the camera?
Yeah, so
the mouse is just moving the camera. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's like doing a Zangief on the keyboard, doing a 360 on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Have you played this at all, Gardner?
Not yet. No, I played Ship of Harkinian, but I have not messed with the recompile yet.
Okay, but you have been playing an N64 game.
Yes, I have been playing Doom 64 Night Dive's port, and it is truly. I keep going back to it, and I played it when I was a kid, and I think I played Doom 64 more than the original Doom because I had an N64. But I just love the atmosphere of Doom 64. I love the interesting, like, different take on all the zombies or the monsters, whatever you want to call them, demons, that's the word. And I don't know, it sucks me in every single time. And I go back to it like literally at least 2 or 3 times a year since it's been released.
So first of all, Doom 64, and this is no slight on the actual Doom 3, I don't mean it that way, but Doom 64 is Doom 3.
Oh,
like, yeah. It is that good. It is that much of like, you should play it if you enjoyed Doom 1 and Doom 2. And yeah, I love, like Gardner's saying, I love the different takes on the enemies and like the ambiance, like the fact that I don't know, did they just have not enough room for the music? So like then they just made like weirder, stranger, but like kind of like not all the way there, but just kind of quite there music where it's like more ambient than anything, right? And it takes on more of like the horror game kind of feel, but it's still very much Doom gameplay.
Yeah, it really does feel like Doom 3, honestly, and it does occupy that space. The music almost has like a Quake vibe to it, like the
Yeah, I
atmosphere
can
of
see that.
Quake. And I love that, you know, it's still in that like colorful, playful world of Doom versus Doom 3's like, you know, Martian, you know, steel, like dark steel. Like I'm not a big fan
Yeah.
of Doom 3. But yeah, and you know, Doom is one of my favorite franchises too. Like I use Doom Eternal to benchmark everything. Like I just love these games. So Doom 64 is where it's at.
Now, Russ, the last time that we spoke about the Nintendo 64, you made an admission, and I'm curious if that has changed
Shocking
at
one.
all. What's that?
No, I've never held a Nintendo 64 controller. It's a period in my life where I never have played that system at all. I mean, I've emulated some of that stuff. I've tried Doom 64 and I was like, this is so weird. You know, like it's like not what I was expecting, because I know all the others, you know, but that one was kind of in a league of its own. And so, yeah, I've never played Nintendo 64 on a real console. I don't know. Even when I was in Japan, there were some that were so cheap, and I was like, $20 I can get a Nintendo 64. It's in great shape, you know. But I was like, it's just not my system, you know. I just didn't live during that era in terms of playing games. So
I want you to get one, if for no other reason than just to make a video about my first impressions, having never touched an N64 ever. Like I want to see what your reaction. Almost, you know what? That would be an awesome live stream. You know, when you hit 500,000 subs on YouTube, do a live stream. I'm finally going to play a Nintendo 64 game on a Nintendo 64. Although I don't know how you can capture that for. I'm sure that there's capture cards out there that can do it.
Yeah,
but
I can figure it out.
I would love to hear because we all played it and we were like, oh, okay, that's how you do 3D controls. But if I go back to it, I'm like, whoa, that's so bad. You know, it was a nightmare. And I would love to just hear somebody who has no nostalgia for it at all.
Yeah, it would be really interesting, you know, especially because I'm familiar with a lot of the games now, but only on modern hardware. And so it would be interesting to be like, oh, this is what they intended, you know. So
yeah,
I don't know.
You know,
very weird
you know
stuff.
what's funny?
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I saw some people playing Majora's Mask recompiled on like, you know, a PC with the Switch's N64 controller, and it apparently works perfectly, including on the Steam Deck. There's one button that you'll have to remap, but that's it. Otherwise, it works perfectly.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to go back to the N64 and play games, especially games like Perfect Dark, which is one of my favorite games on the console. And because of the fact that there's only one analog stick and you have to use the right the C stick or the C buttons to like move, and then the left stick to shoot or aim. I mean, and it's just like it's so alien to how we play and the standards that we use today. So it would be fascinating to see Russ go at it for the first time.
Leave a comment down below if you want Russ to do that.
Let's do it.
By the way,
It'll
that's
be,
why. No, go ahead, Russ.
I was gonna say it's just gonna be an exercise in frustration for me because I'm gonna be so bad at it. I mean, like I learned first person shooter games from Red Faction 2 and the original Halo. Like that, I only know twin stick, and so anything else is just so foreign to me.
So I just picked up my. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Rich.
Well, I was just going to say that is why I love these ports and recompiles and decompiles and things like that, because I have no nostalgia for, I barely have nostalgia for these games. Like I'm playing Majora's Mask and it's not because I have nostalgia for it. It's a genuinely good game, right? But and so is GoldenEye, but I can't play GoldenEye with the original controls. So like I can play it on the 1964 emulator with the mouse movement, whatever. Basically, I can play it if it has like modern controls, but I can't play it with the old school controls. I can't.
Yeah, when GoldenEye came to Xbox, was it last year or 2 years ago? I can't remember. Like whenever it happened, my son came up and he and I sat down and we played on my Xbox split screen multiplayer. That game does not hold up. And everybody's going to be mad at me because I didn't play GoldenEye back in the day. because when GoldenEye came out, I was totally obsessed with Ultima Online instead, and so that was the game that I was playing instead of that. So I had no nostalgia for GoldenEye. So when it came out, I ended up, I don't remember if it was on Game Pass or if I bought it because it was cheap. But anyway, we played it on this. We played probably 2 or 3 rounds. I killed him, he killed me. And I was like, this is just, I mean, it's fun because I was hanging out with him, but I was not having fun because the game is just not a fun game anymore. What were you saying, Rich?
I was just realizing you meant the multiplayer. Well, I'm sure you probably don't think either holds up, but you were talking about the multiplayer, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was not playing the single player story.
Yeah.
I do remember playing that a little bit at a friend's house back in the day, but we didn't play it a bunch or whatever. And so I only played the multiplayer with my son, and we both, after a couple rounds, we were just decided we'll just be better off playing anything else.
That's fair. I still enjoy the single player. I think it still has like things that are less common these days. Just like you shoot at the hand, and like you see the actual animation for the hand dropping the gun or whatever. So it has like these location based hit boxes. It has the like the timing. So like, can you do 00 agent in less than X minutes or whatever? And that stuff is still fun to me.
It also has bots, which you don't see a lot in multiplayer games today.
That's true.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Time Splitters 2 is like my big entry into like this kind of style of game. And yeah, the bots and stuff, you can just kind of set up a match and to just play. I always loved that. Yeah.
Yeah. Time Splitters 2. That's a classic.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You talk about the different hitboxes and the hit detection based on the hand. That's another mechanic that doesn't get used very much anymore. So
that's true.
That brings us right back to that. A minute ago, I picked up my Steam Deck because I can't put it down because I'm obsessed with Animal Well. I'm 12 hours in. Carrie finished this game in 6 hours. I'm at double his playtime, and I've only got 3 of the fires lit. I have a bunch of empty stuff in my inventory. This game is my new obsession. I think that there was a point during the week, I think it was probably around Wednesday or so, where I put it down because I was getting frustrated because I couldn't figure out where I needed to go. I wish, my only gripe with this game, and it's nitpicking, is I wish that I could zoom in on the map more so that I could see, bring up the map and zoom in and be like, okay, that's where that is. Because there was a boss that I had fought, and I ran into him, and I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. And I ran away, right? Because I wasn't sure what to do. And I thought maybe I just wasn't equipped for it yet. And then I believe it was last week when we were talking about it, and I had gameplay footage playing of the game, and I had seen that boss, and I saw there's a little spot where you could run underneath that boss. And I just in the trailer, and I just ran out of that room. And I spent, we recorded on last Sunday, and I spent from that day until Thursday just searching the map for that boss because I couldn't remember where it was. And the map is very nondescript. Yeah,
it's pretty obtuse. I've only played less than an hour, but I do remember that almost immediately, right? And like a lot of more modern Metroidvanias have so many convenience features, right, for the map, where you can drop pins, and you can sometimes you can have screenshots like in Prince of Persia. So you have all of these.
Prince of Persia is perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has none of that, and I think that's intentional, right? But that doesn't make it any less frustrating, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, they only had 40 megabytes to work with, so
This is true.
Well, nobody told him that they could only work with 40 megabytes. I mean, we live in a time where they probably could have increased the storage just a little bit. Even if it was just put the whole map in there and let me zoom in really, really close. That would have changed. I probably would be done with this game already. I have to say though, just just in the last 2 days, I found 3 more abilities that I didn't know about before, and I was just like, oh my god, these abilities are so cool, and it changes how you play the game. So once I had these abilities and I'm going through all of the places that I've been through before, I'm like, okay, now I got to go through and use this thing, and now I got to go through and use that thing, and just keep going to the different rooms and trying to try the different abilities. There's a lot of backtracking in this game, but I mean, it's easily going to be a game of the year contender for me. It's so good.
Yeah.
Bill, you can go old school.
Couldn't hear what you said, Rich.
I said you can go old school and get some graph paper and make your own map.
I could. I won't, but I could. There's a reason we don't do that anymore. It's like when people are like, let's go camping. I'm like, we built houses to get away from the outside, right? What were you going to say, Gardner?
I'm a big Metroidvania fan myself. Super Metroid, I grew up on that. And this game, I've only played it for about maybe an hour or two, but I keep like running into like these places where I'm like, oh, I need to remember this because I'm going to be back here when I have whatever power I need. And that is like, if I wasn't so busy working on the patch for Dudelings, this would totally suck all of my time, and I wouldn't get videos done or anything else. Yeah, so I can't wait till I'm not so busy that I can have time to play this.
Yeah, and I kind of wish Carrie was here, because I wanted to ask him, is the pencil as useless as I feel like it is? And he's not here to answer that question. So without spoilers, people, let me know in the comments if the pencil is as useless as it feels, because I think maybe I'm doing it wrong. Anyway, those are the games that we've been playing. Anybody have anything else that they, also rans that they want to mention before we move on?
I will add that the last time I used pen and paper for notes on a game was Wind Waker. And I remember during that, I was like, I don't ever want to do this again. And so yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah. So Majora's Mask, right? Like there are times where I didn't need pen and paper, but I wanted to take a note down. And thank goodness for Steam, right? Because now they have the notes feature. So
right.
If you remember at the beginning, and it turned out I didn't need the notepad at all because I remembered the code. But if you remember the beginning of Majora's Mask, where there's a code that you can get from a group of kids. And so, yeah, I wanted to write that down, but I remembered it.
I prefer that games just remember that stuff for me. Like, when the group of kids gives you the password to go into their hideout or whatever, I can't remember exactly how it was because it's been years since I played that game.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to have to write it down. I don't want to have to remember it. I just want when my character goes to talk to the person, my character just says, oh, well, this is the password, because the game knows that I should know the password. It's funny though, because you talk about like making a grid map or everything. I believe, if I remember correctly, on the Nintendo Switch, they had the Sega, not like Nintendo Switch Online, but they had like the Sega Ages games, I believe, and they brought out Phantasy Star, and it has like that old grid system built in but instead of you getting out a piece of graph paper, the game will draw your map as you're walking through the grid. And I didn't beat that game, but I can tell you this, I'm way more likely to beat Phantasy Star. Maybe it might have been Phantasy Star 2, I'm not sure which one. I'm way more likely to beat that with the built-in map than I am doing it the old school.
There's a popular game on DS and 3DS, right? Etrian Odyssey, where like the whole point of the game is that it's a dungeon crawler and you make the map, right? So the bottom screen, the touch screen, is all for you making the map. So that's not for you. Don't get that game.
See, but that seems cool because it's built into the game. I don't have to pick up a piece of paper and okay, I screwed that up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I won't buy it, but that's cool that it's there. All right, let's move on to this.
Hey, listen.
That's right, everybody. It is time for the nerd test, where I select some audio from a game, and the panel has to figure out what game it's from. The group gets 10 yes or no questions that they can ask me, and each person on the panel gets one guess. See, the rules are starting to get a little more concrete now that I'm understanding how it works. Currently, the score is panel 2, Bill 0. So let's see if I can stump them this week. The game was released on PC in 1998, and here is the audio for the game.
Welcome, young Garrett. In the nearby rooms, I will instruct you in the various skills you will need to survive. Please stay in the entrance area to each room while I explain the room's purpose. When you are ready to begin your lessons, proceed down this hallway to the first room. You must learn how to move unseen. Stay in the shadows. Avoid the light. The indicator on your screen will tell you how visible you are. Try to reach the top of the platform without being seen.
All right, so there you have it. So 1998, it was released on the PC. Yes or no questions? Go ahead.
I think I have my guess.
Oh my God, really?
I've got a
Okay,
guess,
you get one guess, Russ gets one guess, and Gardner gets one guess. Go ahead if you want to guess it.
Is it Thief?
Oh my God.
That's what I
Three,
That
Bill
was my
0.
guess.
So for the next time you do this, don't say platform and year, because those are going to be some of our first questions, I think. Yeah. As soon as you said PC 98, that narrowed it down to like 3 games. Only like 3 games came out on the PC in 1998. One of them was Thief.
Did you?
So
So I'm taking you
Unreal-
actually played it.
No.
Oh my God.
Never played it. Never
I've
played
played
it.
it.
You played it, Russ? You say you played it?
No, I've never played it, but I didn't even play PC games in 98, but I know at least years of release and what titles and stuff. So
Same.
See,
as
I
soon as
have to look that
Stealth
stuff up. I
98,
don't remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys just have encyclopedic knowledge of when games have come out.
No, so you messed up by picking 1998. That's actually what it really was. 1998 is one of those things that has been memed to death. I'm trying to find it now.
Well, I know it's a huge year, so I went to that year and I said, "What games came out that year?" And I was like, "Okay, well, people always talk about this game, and they always talk about this game, and they always talk about this game, and nobody ever talks about this game." So I figured we could, like, you guys wouldn't know it that easily. But hey, let's talk about Thief. Gardner, you played Thief.
Yeah, when it first came out, me and my cousin sat around his Pentium, I think it was, like, and we played Thief.
Nice.
And I just remember like YOLOing it like most of the time because I didn't have the patience to like be stealthy, and so I'd just like run around and like try to avoid getting seen while like running through broad daylight. That was a blast when we were kids.
Does it hold up, do you think? Do you know?
I haven't played it since it was released,
1998.
so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it was made by Looking Glass Studios. It was published by Eidos Interactive. The writer for the game was Ken Levine. And there were 4 games in the series. The last one was 10 years ago. So we haven't had a new Thief game in a long time. I mean, it's a stealth game. I think that I'm sure that it holds, like, the mechanics hold up because it's a stealth game. Yeah.
Is it Embracer owned now? Does anyone know? Because it was Crystal Dynamics, wasn't it? It
was Eidos Interactive, but I don't know who bought Eidos after them. I don't even know if they're still around.
I want to say that's Embracer Group. Yep.
Oh, so Embracer. Okay, so we'll never see that again.
Ever. Yeah. So buy the first 4.
Yeah,
I'll play it. I really like. I think that's one of the things I'm rediscovering with Majora's Mask is that I really like this era of 3D games. I think that I think it's my age, right? So like not just nostalgia, but I think that those games are like immensely readable, whereas there's so much detail in modern 3D games that it makes it a little less readable for me personally.
When you say readable, you mean like in modern games they have to paint things yellow in order for you to know where to go?
Yes, actually. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, you're right. Like you look at what was it? The most recent thing was Tomb Raider, right? And they showed, like, people were comparing the original level in Tomb Raider where you look and you're like, well, that's clearly the thing that I have to go interact with. And then they show you the remake and you're like, and then, you know, you look at modern games and you're just looking at this wall and you're like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I ran into an issue this year with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There's a part where Barrett is like in a cave and there's a bunch of stuff that he can climb, right? And a lot of times they had used like the yellow highlights to say, this is where you can climb, that, you know, just as a signal to the player. So we're not walking around, walking up against just random walls trying to figure it out. But there was one spot where they hit it really well and I could not find it. And I ended up having to go and find some gameplay on YouTube so I could see, oh, that's where I'm supposed to go. Because I had gone through the whole cave like 4 times and I couldn't find my way out. And so that's the kind of thing that I can't stand. It's funny that you bring up nostalgia because, you know, High Tech Lowlife had tweeted this out earlier, is that they said, what I find interesting is in the early 2000s, we'd call games from 10 years ago retro, stuff like Super Nintendo and whatnot. But nowadays in 2024, we can't, we don't even call Xbox 360 or PS3 games retro, despite being close to 20 years old at this point. Bob Wolf said, I do, and people get mad because they don't like that's not retro. And so, you know, since we're talking about nostalgia for older games, Rich, what do you consider retro?
The more you mention this, right, because I saw your tweet and the more this is coming up in my head, the more this is like a good topic for like just deep exploration, because there are so many factors here. I will say, I think maybe Xbox 360, right? Like Xbox 360, PS3, I think that's the most recent that I would consider retro. So I will think back to a game like Condemned, Oblivion, right? Oblivion is retro to me. It is. It just is. And I like it. I think it's good. But Infamous, right? Infamous is retro to me. Prototype is retro. But when I think about 10 years ago, so I'm looking at 2014 game releases, Dark Souls 2, I'm not going to call Dark Souls 2 retro. Like most Souls likes are not that different from Dark Souls 2, right? Metal Gear Solid 5, Titanfall. I can't call Titanfall retro. So there's a lot, right? Like we can think about sort of the diminishing returns of modern processors and things like that. But I think also like our tastes have changed, right? So like we don't just care, increasingly, we don't just care about like the best graphics. So there are a lot of great modern games that are just, you know, Power World, right? Like it looks good, but it doesn't look like a top of the line, top of the shelf game. And then there's also just our backlogs have grown bigger too, right? Especially with PC. So I think of Dark Souls 2 not as retro, partially because it's still in my backlog. Like I haven't beaten Dark Souls 2, so it's still a game I have to go back to. So I think 360 is the last generation I would call retro for me.
Gardner, what's retro for you?
For me, I think retro is more of like a mechanical thing. I think like there are certain modern sensibilities, whenever, you know, contemporary sensibilities, if you will. And when you go back and play older games and they violate those sensibilities, that's when something starts to feel retro to me. So if you do like, you know, going from like Mario 64 back to Super Mario Bros. 3, that's a great example. It just feels... it's not old, but it feels different and it violates your sensibilities. Even like from Super Mario World to, Mario for the Wii, right? Like the two games feel very different, even though they are in the same franchise. And I think that it's the sensibilities of contemporary players that define what feels retro. And I think that, you know, if you go back and play games like Gears of War for the 360, like that, the aesthetic of it also feels quite retro to me, where it's from that era where everything was brown, right? You remember everything was just yellow and brown, and that has a distinct retro feel. Some of the, like when you're reloading, like that reloading like mini game where you have to time it right, that has a retro feel to it to me.
There's another mechanic that we don't see anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's a combination of like the aesthetic and the mechanics of the time.
Pushing
Russ,
back a little bit on.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rich.
Real quick, pushing back on that a little bit. Returnal has a sort of active reload, and it's wonderful. So go play Returnal.
Russ, you're retro game core. Like, define it, man.
I got some thoughts. So I think it's more about availability, and I think Rich kind of touched about it a little bit. But like for me, the last retro era is Generation 6. So Xbox, GameCube, PlayStation 2. 360 games I can play on a modern console. And so it's like, it's one of those, if I can put my disc into an Xbox right now and play that game, it's not retro for me. It's about the availability of it. And so we should be able to do that with PS3, but we can't because of Sony. But that's kind of my thing, is that like that Generation 7 is still a modern design to me. The digital era, like that's the start of it there. Digital marketplaces, things like that. So I don't consider those to be retro games at all. For me, it's all Gen 6 and below. And so when I do my own testing and I'm talking about emulation and stuff like that, they're like separate categories for me. I will do everything up through Gen 6. And then I'm like, okay, now let's see how modern games play. And I'll start with Xbox 360.
So that's interesting because we differ slightly on the exact generation, but our philosophies are so similar, right? Because I think if you break down what we're saying, I think we both are saying that it's almost impossible to be retro now. Like at this point, even 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the games that we're looking at that are being made today just cannot be called retro in 10, 15 years from now. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but that seems to be where we align on.
World of Warcraft is 20 years old.
Yeah.
Well, more than
retro
that,
gaming.
actually.
Wow. I think that for my definition kind of gels with your guys' a little bit, where it's like, if you think about like 3D games specifically, there's a clear delineation between like Xbox and Xbox 360, like those games. Because like at the end of the Xbox and GameCube era, 3D games had been figured out and there was a mold and every game had to like conform to that to some degree. And if you think about like the fact that there hasn't been like true innovation with controllers since the 360 era, besides what Valve is doing, that's the other component that, we have kind of settled on what is a game, and most games conform to that. So, that's interesting.
Yeah. I will say I really like it when games break conventions, right? So there's a large crowd of people that are like, I just want a first-person shooter to control like a first-person shooter and should never control like anything else. But I like when there are like just weird new conventions. I struggle to think of a game now. I'm actually thinking of Dudelings as like a different convention, right? That's a different way to control your character in a game. But yeah, I like that sort of stuff.
What's that one where it's like there's like people? Oh my gosh, I can't think of it now. You control like two different guys and they're like linked together. And
Brothers and Ob.
Yes, but both of those.
Oh,
which one did you say, Bill?
It wasn't Ibn Ob and it wasn't Brothers. I was thinking there's like one. It's like an indie game where there's like two characters on each team and there's a ball and you have to but the two characters are like a worm. It's like a worm person with cat dog, and I don't even remember the name of it. Hold on, I gotta find it now.
Just throwing words out.
I feel like
while he's looking for that, I'll show people Ib and Ob, which is one of the craziest games I've ever played. It's really, really cool. It's a 2-player game, and you have the top level and then you have the bottom level, and basically one of you is always either like you're separated and one of you is always like upside down basically as you run through, and everything that you do on one side of this line affects what happens on the other side of this line, and so you have to work together to solve these puzzles. Cool. It's amazing, but do not pick it up if you're not going to be playing it with another person, because it just like it's not break your brain. It's impossible.
It reminds me of
what it's called, Gardner? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Russ.
I was gonna say, it reminds me of Ikaruga. You know, it's like a top-down shooter, vertical shooter, but it has like the color elements to it. So you switch your ship between like black and white, and that'll affect what bullets hurt you, what bullets help you, and it is just mind-bending. It was on Dreamcast and GameCube, and yeah, that's another one that's just like an interesting mechanic, but I could never get over it. Or get around it, I should say.
Yeah.
Did you find your game there, Gardner?
Oh, I have no idea what it's called anymore.
So I will say it sounds similar, but it's obviously not the same thing because this was just something I made in a game jam. We did a game jam one time, just me and some friends, where it was like there was this website that like auto generated a game name, right? Like just put words together to make a game name.
Okay.
And so the game that we ended up landing on was called Pro Sewer Polo. So our game jam was, now we have to make a game that fits this title. That was the title, Pro Sewer Polo. So what we made was a 2v2 like couch versus game, right? Like a sports game. So it's 1v1, but you control one character with the left analog and one character with the right analog. So it's a 2v2 on the teams, 2 avatars versus 2 avatars, but it's one person versus one person with the controllers. So that was, yeah, I couldn't get my own head around it. So that would not make a good game, but it was fun to make.
You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see a hockey game, like a 2v2 hockey game where you have you have 2 players on your team, and you control one of them with the left stick, one of them with the right stick. Passing is the left trigger, shooting is the right trigger, and it's just 2 and no goalie or whatever. I don't, maybe have a goalie on there, I'm not sure, but I think that would be really fun too.
Yeah,
I found it.
Fun.
You found it? What's it called?
It's called Push Me, Pull You.
Okay, tell me about it real quick.
Familiar.
Oh my god, this is a weird. It's by House. Oh my god, this is weird looking. Audio listeners, I apologize that we're looking at some weird stuff. So you guys are gonna have to.
Yes, this is it. Yeah,
I've seen this.
It's actually really, really fun. It's like sumo cat dog people, and you control your team with one controller, and you have to like get the ball outside the ring. It's crazy.
This is very unsettling to look at.
These are the people that made Untitled Goose Game, right?
Yeah. House. Yeah. Audio listeners, there was silence there for a second because we're just looking at how it's unsettling to look at. It feels like something out of a horror movie, but it's also cute at the same time. I don't even know how they managed to pull that off or push that off, I guess.
Very strange.
Yeah. All right. Well, we talked about retro and what makes something feel retro, and I feel like that leads us perfectly to the discussion of Retroarch on iOS and Apple TV. Russ, have you had a chance to test this at all?
Yeah, I did last night, actually, as I was finishing up last night's video. So, yeah, it's working. Everything's good. There are some issues, like not issues, but some peculiarities to it. So all of the cores are preloaded. And so it's not a matter of just going and downloading the specific cores you want. It's going to make it a bigger file size in terms of just buying or downloading the emulator. There's no Dreamcast support. It does have Nintendo 64, just one core. It's the same core that's been on iOS for a while that is pretty buggy, so it'll crash a lot of times. Saturn's on there. I haven't tested it yet. And then Arcade. And then, of course, all the Sega systems like Genesis 32X CD, and then all the Nintendo stuff as well, including DS. And so it's like almost there. Like we're getting a lot of great gameplay out of this. It feels like RetroArch. Everything seems to be good. You know, PSP emulator just came out as well. So now all we're really waiting on is, can we get a good Dreamcast emulator going? And then we'll see about Sega Saturn. The one core they have available is the Beetle core, which is the one that's super accurate, but is pretty demanding. And so that'll be interesting to see. I think most iPhones and iPads can handle it no problem anyway. But I bought an Apple TV, so it's coming in the mail tomorrow. And so I'll probably try to make a video about that at some point. And just what's retro gaming like on this thing? Because it's only $150. I didn't realize it was so cheap. And so, yeah, we'll see.
So I have an Apple TV. That's like my main set-top box that I use to watch shows and stuff. And the process of getting your games on this not a good experience. So basically, when you fire it up, Retroarch tells you go to this website, which is like http:// Apple TV whatever .local, right? So you type that in, you hit enter, it brings up your Apple TV, and then you can drag and drop your files into the right folder. That's great. First off, it doesn't tell you which folder you should be putting your games in, which is irritating. So I had to like go and find out, but it's the downloads folder, right? And you cannot just grab a folder and drop it on there. You have to do it. You have to like make a folder, make a subfolder for Super Nintendo, and then grab your Super Nintendo ROMs and drop them in that folder. So you can't just have like your ROMs folder and drop it on your Apple TV and then have it transfer everything over, because you cannot transfer folders. That put together with the fact that I use RetroArch all the time, but I use it because it was configured automatically for me by EmuDeck, which makes everything easy. This doesn't have that ease. And so like I was like, well, I hooked up a PlayStation controller to it, and I was like, well, what button combination am I supposed to use to quit the game? And it wouldn't, like, I was having trouble quitting the game, and I would hit the PlayStation button and it would bring up the Apple TV menu, not the RetroArch menu. And so I was just getting frustrated. And that's mostly because I don't on the regular use RetroArch where I have to go into menus or anything. I just use EmuDeck, which does everything for me. So I don't know if there's anything that like EmuDeck can do for this kind of thing, but with it the way that it is now, and the ease of which you can get a dedicated device, I just don't see myself ever doing it again. Like I tried it once and I was like, too much work, I'm out. I'm going to stick with like dedicated devices.
So EmuDeck has got, so he basically made some configuration files and he put them up on his Patreon. So you would be able to just grab those, and then you can then just put them in the specific place that RetroArch looks for them. And then that will like map all of your aspect ratios, and then, you know, add some shaders, and then also all your hotkeys and stuff. So it is a workaround. Like he's got it set up. I'll mention it. I'm working on a video. I'm hoping to get that done today before I fly out tomorrow to New York. And so we're going to, I'm going to try to make a guide about how to get RetroArch running, at least in tip-top shape for the iPhone, iPad. I don't have a TV one yet, but it shouldn't be too hard. Like for you, for example, with your problem where you started up a game and you couldn't figure out how to exit it, it's because there's a process. You got to set up your hotkeys before you start a game. Yeah. And then save all them up. You know what I mean? And so that's what my guide will do, is be like, okay, this is the first step. This is the next step. Okay, now we can start playing your games. And so that's what I'll try to do in today's video or tomorrow's video.
And if you're looking to play your games on an Apple TV, keep in mind, they don't have a lot of storage because they are streaming devices. I think you can get one that goes up to 128 gigabytes. But if you have a extensive library, like this is my library of my retro games right here. And there ain't no way this is fitting on an Apple TV. And the Apple TV does not have, you know, because Apple hates ports, it does not have USB that you can use to like just plug a drive into it. So yeah, it's not going to be a good experience. There's a lot better. If you want to have one thing hooked up to your TV and only one thing, then, you know, I think maybe that's the way to go. But if you are willing to have more than one thing, buy a separate like mini PC to do your retro stuff. Russ has a million recommendations for that over on Retro Game Core on YouTube. So that's my recommendation to all of you out there who are thinking about playing your retro games on Apple TV. Gardner, Rich, did either of you guys try that stuff out, or you're not interested?
Haven't tried it out. The lesson I learned from the conversation between the two of you is always wait for the Retro Game Core guide. Then you won't have any questions. If you wait for the guide, you'll have the setup instructions just, perfectly tailored.
I don't have any iOS devices to try it with, so no. I do have a question about it, though.
Yeah.
Does it support RetroNAS? Like connecting with you know.
You mean an Apple TV?
Well, I'm thinking, RetroArch.
Right.
So with my phone, when I was testing it last night, I thought, okay, I've got a bunch of my ROMs on my iCloud drive, which is something that you can access from the Files app within iOS and iPadOS. And so I thought, okay, this would be a good way of just accessing my cloud games, and then I'll play them from there. But RetroArch was kind of tied down that you could only access files within the RetroArch folder. And so you have to move your ROMs into where RetroArch can find them. And so I didn't find any way that I could access a network share. There might be a way to set up a symlink inside of that RetroArch folder, so then you can kind of have access, like tricking it basically. But that's a little more advanced for the kind of things I put in my guides, because I'm mostly going to be like a starter guide. And so it's probably possible, but at least in my testing, I was like, this is going to be too much work already. And so let's just stick with putting the ROMs directly in the folder.
Well, there's your answer, and I don't think that Apple TV. I know that you can get VLC on Apple TV, and VLC does recognize network attached storage. I don't know if RetroArch will do that on the Apple TV, but I don't have a NAS, or well, I have one, but I can't get it to work for like. I'm running into issues with it, and mostly it's just been sitting there while I think, well, I'll get to it eventually, and I just haven't had a chance to get it fixed. I don't have I have very little experience using NASs. Is the plural of NAS NASs?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Not the flex, but I've got a 42U rack in my network closet. I have a dedicated network closet in my house. So that's my first go-to is like transferring files, let's put it on the NAS.
I'm going to be texting you for some help with my NAS because I can't get it I cannot access it. So I'll ask some questions about that. But we've been going for an hour. And Rich, you had there's some comments that people had sent in that they wanted us to talk about, and I definitely want to get to that. But Rich, you had added in some stuff about Valve running into issues in other countries. You wanna tee that up for us for a conversation?
Yeah, so last week I had heard about Steam being banned in Vietnam, and I didn't look into it much. It was also pretty confusing. So shout out to Bellular News, who dropped a video today on that and a more recent development. But basically, it is the story is still developing, so it is still a little unclear. But yeah, they were suddenly banned. Steam was suddenly banned in Vietnam, according to what they said on Bellular News, was that essentially there are local distributors and local game companies, like publishers potentially, that asked for it to be banned, right? Like they lobbied to the government for Steam to be banned. Partially, for example, right? Like the biggest thing is that most of those distributors have to follow local laws and conventions, which is they cannot sell and distribute games that are some level of gory, right? Like some level of blood or whatever. I don't know what the exact whatever is, but because Steam is Steam, they haven't been following those local rules. And in contrast, they did in China, where they have a much larger market, and China was ready to ban Steam there as well. But because they have such a large market in China, Valve decided to follow the local rules, and so now it's not banned, right? But they haven't done so for Vietnam, and so currently it's banned. That's my understanding of what's happening so far. And then more recently, not related at all, but just interesting from the perspective of Steam being scrutinized, right? Is that Poland, the headline is Poland to scrutinize digital game platforms like Steam and PS Store on suspicion of anti-competitive practices. And I like the way, just again, going back to Bellular News, I like the way that they framed it, right? Like, aside from what Valve do, I think there's just a large concern from some entities that there's just a lot of concentration of power in Steam. And so, yeah, I think of course that there are interested parties like those distributors in Vietnam that have to follow those local rules, and then Valve isn't, that will lobby against that. But just, right now, there are just a lot of stores that have to compete with Valve and have very little recourse, right? And so Poland happens to be home of CD Projekt Red, and so you wonder, is this related to GOG in any way?
Right, because CD Projekt Red owns GOG, right?
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So interesting. I don't know. Again, the story seems to be very much developing, so I'm not sure what to make of it. But it's been kind of a theme for the last year or so that competitors seem to be targeting Valve and saying, this is a monopoly.
You've drawn a line in the sand, Rich, and have said whether or not you think that that Steam is a monopoly. In multiple videos, I think.
I framed it as I framed it as a monopoly. I'm walking that back a little bit. I think, again, my thing is concentration of power, right? So I'm not worried. I think Valve is pro-consumer. I think that Steam is probably the best digital store out there. My thing is that a lot of people agree with that notion and then say, kind of imply that Valve is sort of above reproach, right? Like, because they're the best digital store out there, there's nothing to criticize. And I don't feel that way. I think there's a lot to criticize about Valve and Steam, like their moderation policies or lack thereof, things like that. So there's a lot that concerns me about that concentration of power. And so I think of it this way. When it comes to who has more power in just PC gaming, Microsoft or Valve, in 2008, the answer was clear. It was Microsoft. In 2024, the answer is clear to me too. In my opinion, Valve has way more power in the PC marketplace than Microsoft does.
I would agree with that. I will push back a little bit on what you said. I wouldn't say that I would not say that Valve is pro-consumer. I would say that they do pro-consumer things. And I would also say, and this is a quote from a recent video that I had posted, that I don't trust Valve, but I trust Valve more than I trust all of the other companies out there. And it's mostly because they don't have stockholders. Like, that's the thing. There's no public, it's not a publicly shared company. And that makes things way easier to do pro-consumer things because you don't have the stockholders pushing. Russ, do you think Valve has a monopoly with Steam?
I think that there is definitely they're the lead and they're the good guys right now, but they're only going to be the good guys until they aren't. And so I'm always concerned about that with any company, just the inherent trust that we have as Westerners and corporations basically. And so, yeah, they're doing great. They have my trust right now, but you can lose trust. And they've got a monopoly in terms of PC gaming, at least in terms of my own use case, because I love the idea of GOG, but the prices are better on Steam and it's more convenient. And so I end up using Steam. I've gone through, and I think I mentioned before, but I took my entire GOG library and then I rebought all those games on Steam because of the convenience factor. And so that says a lot to me in terms of that. And then obviously the other one's Epic Game Store and stuff. Yeah, I'll log in to get my free game and then never play it. And that's about it. So
yeah, I do the same thing.
I think that's exactly it, right? My use case is exactly that, right? Like I love the idea of GOG. I love the idea of Itch.io more than anything else. Like, I love how Itch.io operates. But where do I buy virtually all my games? Like 99.99% is Steam, like, no question.
Gardner, you put out a game on Itch.io, and you put it out on Valve or on Steam as well. Where would you prefer that people buy it?
Well, I make more per unit on Itch, honestly. Okay. I've connected my Itch account to Stripe, and I control the payment processor. I could also connect it to PayPal. So I get to pick where the PayPal or where the payment processor happens, right? Valve, they have their solution and you use that, right? The thing is, like, Valve, I don't think that they're necessarily a monopoly, right? But they do have a lot of influence, not just over like developers and things like that, but also over their players, right? Valve knows what Facebook and most of these other companies have forgotten. It's that if you have if you make your customers feel like you care about them, then they'll go to war for you. And that's something that Valve still utilizes to this day. Facebook used to do that, right? Like they said, oh yeah, well, this is a free speech platform, and you better use your free speech on our platform. And they don't, I mean, I don't want to get into that too much, but you know what I'm saying? Like Facebook used to like utilize their people, like the people on their platform, as like warriors for them. And Valve still does that. I feel.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it too, right? Like we have seen the good guy live long enough, right? Like we were there for Google will do no evil. We were there for that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people bought into that. I don't remember where it was and how I felt, but I probably bought into that too. And we saw, Google change overnight pretty much. And there may one day come a change of leadership. There may one day it may be publicly traded. I think the other side to that, right, like not having shareholders, is that there's a reason they have no shareholders, and it's the other reason that Valve can do what they want. It's because they're making tons of money, right? They're raking in so much money, and kudos to them. Their costs are a lot lower than other companies that are similar, where they leverage contracting for a lot of things, and so their full-time staff is the 3 digits, right? Like 200-300 people, I think, maximum. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty amazing.
It is. All right, so let's go with some questions that people had sent in. This one, I struggled to put it on here just because I feel like as somebody who's not a lawyer, I don't feel like I'm well versed enough about this, and at an hour 16 into the recording, I don't know if I want to bring this up, but we may end up reattacking this next episode or something. But it has to do with the RMA process for the ROG Ally. We have had 2 videos from Gamers Nexus in this week, I believe. Or no, there was one last week, and then there's a new one this week. And Abel5333 said, please cover the ASUS RMA repair scam. Big problem. So first off, I'm not calling it a scam. Gamers Nexus is calling it a scam just because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if I can get in trouble for whatever. I don't want to get sued by a big company. I'm just a dude in his attic. So here's the thing. Gamers Nexus sent in their ROG Ally to RMA it because the left joystick was not working correctly. They acted like a regular user, not somebody who actually knows what's going on. And so they filled out the RMA slip and they said left joystick only goes up and down. And then they got a series of emails from ASUS that were saying, well, okay, this is how much it's going to cost to fix the screen. And they were like, well, the screen was fine. There's nothing wrong with the screen. Yeah. And the reason that they were being told that this is how much it's going to cost to fix the screen was because there was like a little tiny scratch where Gamers Nexus had opened up the device in order to get their SSD out. So because basically they said, you're going to lose all your stuff. You should take your SSD out, I guess. So they took their SSD out and there was a little scratch on there. And in order to repair the case, they have to take the screen out. And they were like, we're going to charge you $200 to do this. If you don't reply in this many days, then we're not doing it. And we're sending back your system disassembled, essentially. Which if you're not Gamers Nexus, that is a big deal. If somebody sent me an ROG Ally and it was in pieces, I would be like, there'd be another 8-hour live stream of me trying to put the thing back together. So, Rich, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I've only seen a bit of the second video from Gamers Nexus. I will say just their reporting in general is always like top notch, right? So they do exactly what you said, where they don't kind of use their stature or status they always go through this process as though they are anonymous, and they've even had to work around things like shipping addresses, because those addresses have been essentially whitelisted by these companies, so they know these addresses and things like that. So yeah, Steve is someone whose logic and reasoning I hold in high regard. So in that way, yeah, this sounds terrible, and I don't really have any benefit of the doubt to give at this point. Interestingly, in that video that I did see, he mentioned that people were asking okay, because the first problem from last year was the ASUS motherboard that they ran into issues with. And so someone was asking okay, who is a reputable company that I should be using to buy my motherboards? And they were very hesitant to answer that question directly, and essentially did not answer that question directly at all, right? And just said, we don't have a version that a brand that we say you should trust this brand inherently. They will give recommendations for specific motherboards, things like that, but not a given brand. And I think it does speak to I do think this is a larger problem in this PC gaming industry that we've had for some time, where it's hard to find reputable brands and have a consistent RMA process and repair process. I'm hoping that things like this do, make it better overall. But I think it's hard to find just a single brand or anything like that we can kind of put our voices behind collectively.
I saw Russ smile when you mentioned whitelisting addresses, because Russ, you've run into this issue where you've tried to return stuff that isn't working, and there's no way for you to do it anonymously, essentially.
Yeah, it's one of those, I don't go that level as Steve does, and I think it's awesome. I love that they have the staff to be able to do that stuff. I just don't have the means to set something up like that. And I have just no privacy when it comes to some of these companies, even the smaller ones. So for example, Powkitty, they make these cheap handheld devices. I tend to I don't have any communication with them. I can go through a third party person who knows how to get a hold of them on WeChat or whatever, but I never really use it. And so I will just buy their stuff when it goes up for pre-order, but they know my name, they know my address. And so what'll happen is they will send me multiples of what I just bought, different colors and stuff like that, so I can show it off in a video. So they know it's me, and I don't know what else to do about that. So I don't have that kind of privacy. With ASUS, same thing. I had all sorts of SD card issues, but because mine were review units, I didn't have a way of just contacting their RMA process. I just talked to my guy and I said, hey, can I get an invoice to send this back or whatever? And so I don't have that anonymity to kind of be able to operate in that way. So I don't see myself as having a skill to be able to do the things that Gamers Nexus does. I think it's amazing that they're doing it. And full disclosure too, this travel that I'm going on starting tomorrow is sponsored by ASUS. It is related to them, and so they paid for this trip that I'm going on. But I'll obviously talk about it when I make my video about it. But it's one of those things where it's not going to influence me, and I have to kind of figure those things out. It's the worst timing in the world. I actually saw a video from Paul's Hardware yesterday where he was talking about this whole issue, and he's also being sponsored for a trip coming up for ASUS as well. And he's like, I don't know what to do. It's one of those things where, we want to get the news out. We want to talk about these things, and they are, paying for the trip, but it's the journalistic integrity part. Is it going to sway your opinions about something, or is it really just going to be about the item itself? And so it'll be interesting how that all plays out. But yeah, I'm not happy about this whole thing either. I've seen so many aspects of this happen before, not necessarily from ASUS, but from Powkitty, from Ambernick, all those other companies and stuff. I'll get emails from customers and be like, listen, this is the email string that I just had with this company. And you can pick any of them and they will have these things. And part of me is well, I can see the translation issue right here. As a translator, I always look at the language, and I'm like, okay, well, obviously they meant to say this, but this is what they use through Google Translate or whatever. But that's not, again, I think Steve does a great job in Gamers Nexus, where he's not thinking about it from his perspective and his knowledge and understanding of how things work. He's thinking about it like an average consumer and behaves like an average consumer. And that's the point that is really hard with ASUS, is that they are definitely kind of dropping the ball. When something like that, it sounds to me like blackmailing, and it's not intended, and the world-weary version of Russ knows that it's not intentional, that they're not trying to scam customers or whatever, but there's always going to be bad employees or maybe, just bad translations, all those other things that happen. Whether or not that's enough to write off an entire company, that's for the consumer to figure out. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I watched the first video from last week, and then I watched the second video this morning, or maybe it was last. I don't know. Rich and I were texting, and I sent him a screenshot that I was watching it. Was it this morning?
This morning.
Yeah, this morning. So I was sitting there watching it this morning, and it was long. It's like a 40-minute. The second video is like a 40-minute video, and there's a lot of stuff in there with like a lawyer talking about like legal stuff and how they didn't actually break any rules because this didn't happen or because that didn't happen. And I'm leaving all of that for other people to determine. What I will say is that from watching the correspondence back and forth between Gamers Nexus and ASUS, to me, it did not seem like they were sitting there twisting their mustache doing evil stuff. They were just bad at their job.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like. It felt like the people that they were dealing with were bad at their job, and also using Google Translate to communicate with people. So I still feel like I can give them the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, like there's this thing where like Gamers Nexus said it's a scam. And whether or not it's a scam is for other people to determine. That's not up to me. What I always like to think about is I'm just going to look at the product and talk about the product, not the RMA process, because I haven't experienced the RMA process. I've seen a lot of really bad stuff about the RMA process with ASUS, but I haven't experienced any of it because I haven't had to RMA my device. Lucky for me. And this is from somebody who bought. I purchased. I didn't get a review unit of the ROG Ally. I bought that one myself. So I haven't had to deal with that. So I don't know how I feel about this. I feel like, boy, it's like Russ, you mentioned, just judging the hardware and leaving the other stuff for a different thing. I love what Gamers Nexus is doing, but I feel like that's something that we always have to try and keep in mind.
Yeah, I think of it as a factor, right? So it's like, yes, this product is amazing, but you better hope it doesn't break, because if you have to go through the RMA, it's probably going to suck with this device. So that is a factor you have to consider if you are thinking about buying it. Get it from Best Buy so you can return it that way.
Yes.
Those are the other things you can kind of factor in, right? And so it's weird where it's like you're looking at the hardware itself and you're like, okay, like D-Brand, for example. I love their stuff and I hate using their website. I hate communicating with those people because of the way that they market. I hate it, right? But I still like this stuff, and it's just a factor I have to consider. Is like, okay, I'm going to use my kill switch case, but I also don't like the company. And I think that human beings are complicated enough that we can kind of figure that out. And yeah, I agree with you, Bill, that I don't think this is something that ASUS is deliberately scamming people. Like they have a policy, a piece of paper up on the wall that says, okay, when somebody brings something in, these are the steps we're going to do to wheel and deal and get money out of the customer. It's just that somebody's bad at their job. And Bill and I are probably in a unique position because we both were in the military. And there are many places where people are assigned to a position that they are not qualified to do. Right. And that's just what happens in the military. And so you deal with people who are bad at their jobs all the time. And so it's one of those things. I know there's a saying about it, but it's like, don't treat something that's evil if it can be explained by human incompetence. And that's probably one of the aspects that we're thinking of here.
Hanlon's razor. It's one of the razors. Right. I want to say Hanlon's. Okay. Yeah. And by the way, I was literally thinking about your disdain for D-Brand and how, like, I don't mind, except for that one case, their recent tweet that they had. I'm not going to bring it up here, but they had a recent tweet that was particularly bad, and they should not have done that. But outside of that one instance, I enjoyed D-Brand, and I was thinking about it yesterday, like the dichotomy between me and you on this specifically. And I'm like, oh, I get it. For me, it's like the New York thing. Like, and they say in New York, they're not nice, but they're kind, right? So like they'll be rude in terms of getting to the train or whatever. But if they see someone with the stroller, they're not going to say a word. They're going to help you with the stroller up the stairs, put it down, again, not say a word, and walk away, right? So they're kind, but not nice in New York. And so that's how full disclosure, I've spoken to people at D-Brand. I've been sponsored by D-Brand. And when I speak to those people, they're very kind human beings, right?
Yes.
So Right. So they're very kind people, but yes, they're very prickly in their tweets and their marketing.
Almost so much that it was shocking when I was talking to the guy, because I also have been sponsored by Dbrand and have talked to them, and like when I got the email from them, I was like, oh, that's so weird that they're just being like, they're talking like a person and not a giant D-bag, because that's what their marketing is. They're just giant D-bags all the time.
Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, I not benefit of the doubt, but I do think problems like these are common. I think, the wording scam, I think that was very specific for Gamers Nexus, right? Like they said ASUS scammed us, which, I mean, kind of objectively they got scammed, right? That's not to say that this is an ongoing scheme or whatever. It's just they got scammed.
Well, if it happened to you, you would feel like you were scammed.
For sure. And yeah, these are
correctly? Oh, sorry.
No, go for it, Gardner.
Correctly? I haven't been following the story, but am I hearing that they said it's going to cost $200 to fix, and if you don't pay it, we're just going to send a disassembled unit back to you?
Yes. Although if you watch the video, it seems like that's just like form letter nonsense. Like they're sitting there and I'm going to guess that you sit there and you click, like the person who's doing this, like clicks buttons to say, include this, include this, include this. And then they send it off and they're like, we took it apart and eventually to ASUS's credit, Gamers Nexus said, there's nothing wrong with the screen. The screen's fine. Unless you broke my screen, leave the screen alone. I just want my joystick fixed. And at the end of the day, without knowing that was Gamers Nexus, that's exactly what happened. ASUS said, oh, okay, well, then we'll fix your joystick. But the communication was a nightmare. Like, I highly suggest everybody watch the video, because you're just like, holy cow, how can you be this terrible at email? And that's what it feels like.
Yeah, so that's the last thing I was going to add on this for my end, is that I think, from Steve's perspective, the biggest problem about this is that they knew that they had problems because Steve exposed them last year, right? Mm-hmm. And going back to timing, this was last year was on the eve of the Ally release. This year it's on the eve of Ally X release. So they really need to fix this, because it's going to continue to hurt them when they have these big releases. So yeah, like it does sound a lot like Hanlon's Razor. There is incompetence, but they are aware of that, right? They have been made aware of that. So what steps are they going to take? Like whether that is reviews of these customer service interactions, like spot checks or something like that, whether it's surveys or something like that, like what steps are they going to take, not just to control the damage, but to fix this on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, and that's something that they need to be, I think that they need to be public about it, because last year they said, hey, we've got a 10-point plan. This is what we're going to do. Doesn't seem like they did it. It seems like they just said that they would do it, and then they were hoping, because it's probably more expensive to do that stuff, to implement those changes, and then they were hoping, oh, everybody's just going to forget about this, and then we'll be able to move on. And that's what I feel like most of these big companies end up doing, is they say, you know what, if we just put our heads down and let everybody scream at us for a little bit, eventually they'll get bored and start screaming at somebody else about something else, and everybody's going to forget what happened.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're evil. It's because they're a company who wants to make money, and doing it the right way is more expensive, and their shareholders often won't let them.
Yeah. I'm thinking the thing that keeps coming to mind is like my car, for example. So I got a Volkswagen. It's fine. I don't mind the car, but taking that in for service every year or whatever is such a hassle for me, because they're like, oh, we recommend this upgrade. We recommend that upgrade. And all these things that are trying to fleece me for. And I don't know which ones I actually need. Like, I'm not intimately familiar with how a car works anymore. It's not the 90s. Like, I don't go under the hood anymore. It's one of the conveniences I have in the modern day. Right. But it's a factor when I think about buying a car. It's like, okay, so that's just a negative aspect of when I try to purchase something. If you're going to buy an ROG Ally, you have to have that as a factor. It's like, it could be a pain in the butt if I need to have this thing fixed, much like how it is with my Volkswagen. And so it's a factor to me. I think it's an incompetence in people being bad at their jobs, as opposed to a deliberate conspiracy to fleece their customers for, screen repairs or whatever.
Yeah. Just one more thing here is the Best Buy, right? Like, that's a great point. And, one of the problems that you have with the Steam Deck is that you don't have that as an option at all, right? Valve has been very good to pretty good, depending on who you ask about their repair policies. And it basically depends on whether you got there early and you get Valve personally, or you got one of their repair centers later on, where they outsourced a lot of the repair work. But, that's entirely dependent. And then, of course, you still have to ship it and all of that stuff, as opposed to just take it back into Best Buy and get a refund or a replacement.
Yeah,
right?
And a lot of these companies, they just know we're not going to get sued because it's too much work to sue us. And, in the Gamers Nexus second video, they talked about that for a little bit. But the perfect example is Nintendo. Nintendo just won their lawsuit. They had a class action lawsuit against them over the Joy-Cons, and Nintendo won. So basically what Nintendo did was they said, well, you know what? We're just going to ship this thing and everybody's just going to have to deal with it. And if something happens with your Joy-Cons, send them to us and we will repair them. Although by repair them, they just send you back new Joy-Cons, because that's what happened to my son. With his Switch, they just sent him back a new Switch instead. And he lost his Animal Crossing save because Animal Crossing didn't work with cloud saves. So that's the kind of thing that these companies do. They know that it's always in their favor because it's way too expensive to sue them. And you bring up Valve, Rich. Somebody, I don't even know how to say this guy's name. 1576. He said, "Can you guys please talk about the black screen of death on Steam Decks? Appears to be Russ's problem." Russ, is that your problem?
It's not. So the problem they're talking about is that if you have your Steam Deck in standby and then the battery depletes, then often when you turn it back on, the screen won't turn on. You can still access everything and whatnot. So you have to go in and update it to a specific version of BIOS using, like a USB out or a video out, so you can see something on an external screen. You're supposed to update the BIOS and run a couple other tricks to basically reset it. I did all that stuff. It didn't work for me. And so the one interesting thing about it is that it did make my screen power on by doing all that tricks. So now instead of a black screen, I have a gray screen, basically, in that it's lit, it's backlit now. And so I have not delved any further into it. I have not contacted Valve about it. This is a device I purchased myself. I've just been so busy, trying to make videos because I'm going to be gone for a week. And so I was trying to, front end a bunch of videos. I've been working on new studio upgrades too. And so, yeah, that's really it. It's the black screen of death thing is a fix that's on Reddit and whatnot. And you can see the Valve solutions for it. And I think it works for most people. It didn't work for mine, unfortunately.
Yeah, there are a lot of variants, it seems like, right? And so I've seen that plenty of people, well, not plenty, but enough people that have had the black screen of death have not been able to resolve it, no matter what they do. And it's similar to yours, where they can get it to work on an external monitor. And I've even seen reports that some people have replaced their screen entirely and it still doesn't work, right? So I do think I have obviously no insight into how common or how frequent this is. But just based anecdotally on the stuff I've seen on Reddit and things like that, it seems significant enough, right? Valve is probably aware. I don't know what they're doing about it, but I did make a video on this a while ago. I think Jimmy from Deck Ready also made a video about this a couple months back. So yeah, it is a problem, and hopefully Valve is doing something about it.
Yeah, and the thing that I will point out is that no matter what company you're talking about, when you make millions of a thing, some of them are going to suck. Some of those million things that you made are going to be stinkers. And if you don't win the lottery when it comes to, hey, I bought this thing and it works perfectly. If you don't win that lottery and you get one that doesn't work, it's really nice. Like Russ said, when you can just say, you know what, I'm just going to go back to Best Buy and hand them, here you go, give me my money back or give me a new one. That makes things so much easier. And that's another reason that I would really, really like to see the Steam Deck in stores, which I cannot believe that it still hasn't happened outside of the What's the region that they?
Japan, Asia.
Yeah, the Japan and the Asian region. It still hasn't happened outside of there where they're in stores, and that's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that is going to do it. Russ, you're getting on a plane, leaving on a jet plane, as the song goes, and you've got some videos in the can, as people in the industry say. What videos are coming?
So I don't have any ready yet. And so I was planning on making a couple controller reviews. And then last night when I was playing with Retroarch, I was like, no, I need to scrap all of those, even though I'm halfway done with them, and just make a Retroarch video. So I think this week, if I can get it done today, we'll just have like a Wednesday release of my Retroarch setup guide for iOS. And that's going to be it until I get back. And then I'll do something this coming weekend after that.
And I will watch that very quickly after it goes up. So there you have it. Gardner, what do you got cooking right now for videos that people can go watch?
So I'm doing like a 25-minute long deep dive into the best controllers to use with your Steam Deck when it's like on your TV. I have like my desk is littered with controllers right now.
Nice.
I'm literally working on it today, and it should be out tomorrow. I'm very excited about that.
Okay, yeah. So I don't want to spoil Gardner's video. So Gardner, I don't want your answer on this because I want people to go watch your video to answer this. But Russ, favorite controller?
I use the 8BitDo Ultimate because it has the dock, so I can just pull it off. It's got the 2.4 gigahertz connection, so I use that one.
Rich?
It was the 8BitDo Ultimate. I think it's currently that one. Oh, no, the light. There we go.
Oh, the Gully Kid King Kong Max 4
King
or whatever?
Kong 3. King Kong 3 Max, yeah. Similar, right? Like very similar to 8BitDo Ultimate. I like the paddles. I don't have a need for like the dock, although that's kind of nice, but it's just I end up using it in so many different areas that I just travel with it, so to speak. Yeah.
Nice.
Is that the third one, Gardner?
Yeah.
And it has a dongle. And the more I've had controllers with a dongle, the more it's like, I feel like this is a need, right? Like as an option, like more controllers should be doing it. Yeah.
Bluetooth sucks.
Yeah.
So like I used to do a Stadia podcast and I have a bunch of Stadia controllers, right? And I did the process that Google came up with so that you could convert them over to Bluetooth controllers when they shut down Stadia because they're cowards. But I did all that and every single time I pair them, I get, it pairs just fine. Awesome. And then I go to use it and like the buttons don't work the way that I want. And I'm just like, this is so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my favorite controller is the DualSense Edge right now to use, unless I'm like on an Xbox, the controller that I like the most is the DualSense Edge. I like that it has the gyro. I like that it has the touch pads. Like it has all of that stuff built in, and then it also has the back paddles. It's the thing that feels most like a Steam Deck. The one thing that the Steam Deck has that none of them do is, yes, the trackpads, but it also has capacitive touch thumbsticks, and everybody needs to do that. If you've got gyro in your controller, then the top of that little stick needs to have a capacitive thing so that it works same way, because it's just so cool once you've used it. Going back to not having that is terrible.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so that's going to do it for us today. Listen, everybody, I just want to say, if you want to check out this podcast and you want to get it ad-free, then there's a link to the Patreon down below that like button. Huge thank you to our the newest patrons, Armand, Archibald, Christopher, RDK, and Joe McNally. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you. And that's going to do it for this episode of the NerdNest podcast. Stay rad, everybody. Bye-bye.